Okay, good evening, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Gary Mond. I'm chairman of the National Jewish Assembly, and we're the organisation that's putting on this hustings event tonight. What is different about this event is we have speakers from each of the five main political parties. Each of them represent standing in different constituencies, but what they have all in common is that the constituencies where their candidates have got substantial Jewish populations. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask each of the five parliamentary candidates to address us for about 5 minutes each. Then I'm going to ask two or three questions myself, and then we're going to throw it open to everyone to ask questions. If you wish to ask a question, please could you raise your virtual hand? If you have a look on your screen, near the bottom of your screen, you'll see towards the right-hand side, you'll see a button that says raise hand. And you can raise your hand at any time. When we get to questions, I will take them in the order in which I see them. Please note that when you ask a question, please ensure it is a question and not a speech. So 30 seconds or so and not 2 or 3 minutes. And please, can you also remember that your questions will be to all five candidates. Each of them will be asked to comment on your answer. They're questions to everyone. So the five speakers and the order in which they're speaking are Amit Jogia, who is the Conservative Party's parliamentary candidate for Hendon, Rutendra Nath Banerjee, who is the Liberal Democrats candidate for Harrow East, Catherine Becker, who is Reform UK's candidate for Hampstead and Highgate, Nicola Payne, who is the Green Party's candidate for Birmingham Edgbaston, and finally, Christian Wakeford, who is the Labour Party's candidate for Bury South. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Amit, please, to address us. Amit.
Thank you so much, Gary. Good evening to all the participants tonight. I just want to start by saying a huge thank you to the NGA for organising tonight's husting and bringing us all together to discuss issues that matter to the Jewish community here in the UK. My name is Amit Jogia, and I'm the Conservative parliamentary candidate for Hendon. Hendon has one of the largest Jewish populations in the country, and it's an area that I love. I was born in Hendon, and I'm so proud that it's one of the most diverse constituencies in the country. I'm Hindu by background, and my family came to this country as refugees from East Africa over 50 years ago, and they were given a warm welcome. And many families like mine have lived side by side with the Jewish community, and we have many shared values, many shared concerns, including so many common themes, big loving families, large families, and a love for food as well. And it's such I'm so pleased to be able to campaign for this constituency going forward. By background, I am a political advisor to Rishi Sunak at Number 10, where I focused on faith, race, and communities, an area that I'm hugely passionate about. And I was honoured to work alongside our Prime Minister in his response to October the 7th last year. And I'm proud that I was able to work with the Prime Minister, who has offered his unequivocal support for Israel to defend herself and, of course, to the Jewish community. And I hope that everyone here who's joined tonight will agree that the Conservative Party has a strong record for standing up for the Jewish community and, of course, for Israel, especially since October the 7th. If I may, I would like to share just a brief insight of the work that we've done since October the 7th. I remember the morning of the attacks when we were coming to terms with exactly what had happened that Shabbat morning during Sukkot. And I'm so proud that the Prime Minister was one of the first leaders to come out to condemn Hamas, to call them out as a terrorist organization, and to call and support Israel, that Israel has every right to defend herself. And I'm so pleased that the Prime Minister and the party still stand firmly on that stance. The very next day, on October the 8th, for the very first time, Number 10 flew the Israeli flag in support of Israel. The Prime Minister visited Kinloss very shortly afterwards, JCOS, a leading Jewish school in the country, to show his support to the community. And it was very sad to hear that many Jewish schools felt threatened and were closed for the very first time in the history in the UK. And I was pleased that the Prime Minister wasted no time and came out in support for the community. And there were many other initiatives, such as lighting the memorial candle at number 10, and also most recently standing up against the encampments and summoning the chancellors of all the major universities in the UK and working with the University of Jewish Students to help combat the unfortunate rise of anti-Semitism in our colleges. We are living through unprecedented times, and one of the major issues that we face is the rise of anti-Semitism in our streets. This is something that I face here on the streets of Hendon as well. We had an incident last Shabbat on Friday here in Brent Street, and it's completely unacceptable. And it makes me very, very sad when residents say to me that they feel safer in Israel than they do here in Hendon or in the UK. I think that's incredibly sad, and I want to vow, and I will work with the party to make sure that more is done to make sure that people feel safe. No one should be afraid to go into London during the weekend. No one should be afraid to wear their kippah or Star of David, and I want to be a strong voice for the Jewish community in that. Here as a community, we are very concerned about the stance that other parties are taking, especially in recognizing the Palestinian state. We're concerned that regardless of what people think of a two-state solution, in the midst of a war, recognizing Palestine is seen as rewarding terrorism. And I know this is not the right time to do so, especially when our hostages are still in captive. We're concerned about many other politicians, especially in the Labour Party, Angela Rayner, Diane Abbott, for their stance there with Palestine, and also previous anti-Semitic comments and how they're still within the Labour Party. Another big issue that we are facing that community have come to me about is Labour's proposed 20% tax on private and independent schools. Now, this is a policy that doesn't just affect the top private schools such as Eton and Harrow, but this would have a huge disproportionate impact on Jewish independent schools, a large number of which are in Hendon, Finchley and Golders Green and other parts of the country, many of which are largely subsidized and where parents will not be able to absorb the cost. And I'm sorry to say that many Jewish schools have already said to me that they will face closure because quite frankly, they will not be able to afford to stay open. And there will be no alternative provision for these students. So I will be fighting hard to make sure that this policy does not take place. To wrap up, other concerns that we have are around the BDS bill that Labour continue to block, and also over what we've seen over the last few months as well around a calls for an arms embargo and the ceasefire as well. Again, factors which undermine Israel's right to defend itself and primarily undermine efforts to release the hostages and efforts to get rid and root out Hamas once and for all, which will be help bring stability, is the only way to bring stability to the region. And Israel is a beacon of democracy in the region, something that I'm proud to support and that I will continue to do so as the Conservative parliamentary candidate for Hendon. That's conscious of time, and I look forward to answering all your questions later this evening.
Thank you very much indeed, Amit. Now, Ritendra Banerjee for the Liberal Democrats. Ritendra.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much, Gary. And also thank you very much to your members and those that have been able to attend to hear us this evening. And it's very kind of you for your invitation for me to speak. I am the candidate here for Harrow East, and that covers a North London area from Stanmore down towards the edge of Hendon, Queensbury and Edgware. There's a significant Jewish population here, and I suspect many of your members are from that area too. There is also, having said that, a very substantial Muslim population in this constituency as well. My background is that my career hasn't been in politics at all. I'm not a career politician. After I graduated, I left this country and worked. I did my master's in America and ended up in California for 5 years, with working with and starting up IT companies, with some very very clever people. So after the dot-com sort of bubble burst, I returned back to this country and learned from the many things that I saw in California, and decided to retrain as a teacher. I did my teacher training in Edgware at the Edgware School now, which is now known as London Academy on Spur Road. And I left full-time employment to look after my elderly father, my late father, who at the time was suffering from dementia. And I had to leave full-time education as an assistant head teacher, because my mother was struggling to cope. She was elderly too. And after my mother also passed away during COVID, I went back into industry and started up a couple of companies, and the one I'm focusing on now is in the fintech industry. We're heavily invested in Web3, or Web Mark 3, depending on how you want to describe it. And that's based, we operate out of Cambridge, but a lot of my work is based here, or rather, that I myself am based here in Harrow. So that's my background. That's pretty much who I am. I can't say that my political background is huge at all, but I understand what families are having lived through it, what families are having to suffer, particularly through what's been a grueling few decade and a half imposed upon us. The issues that seem to be coming up is really, of course, the atrocities that occurred on October the 7th, many months ago now, and they're still not coming to an end. That concerns us, and hugely. Obviously, we've been calling for a ceasefire, a bilateral ceasefire, since yesterday, really, since the beginning. If I have a look, I remember during the Mayor of London elections, that we had put across what we would do with the Met Police to ensure that everyone is feeling safe on the streets of London, with regards to the police, and how they make decisions as to what is insulting and what is inciting violence against members of the Jewish community. The police are being stretched. The police know that themselves. We don't really have to go into that. We know why police numbers have been cut. I want to also quickly talk about the initiatives that Liberal Democrats in London have been working on. We've been working with Stand Up Education, co-led by the CST, involving ourselves with workshops among the secondary school aged children, for them to understand, particularly with social media and the very free ability for social media to be used to bully, to antagonize, to intimidate. And we've been working with children, with CST, against anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. We've got our GLA candidate, our assembly members who've also been very, excuse me, very keen to ensure that everyone feels safe and has respect for each other in the streets of London. And I believe it's Caroline Pidgeon and Nisa Hassim, our two lady assembly members, who work very closely with the Jewish Muslim Women's Network. But I'm keen to be grilled and explore questions with your membership as we continue. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rutendra. Thank you. Catherine Becker for Reform UK. Catherine.
Thanks very much, Gary, and all your team. So yes, my name's Catherine Becker, and I'm the Reform UK candidate for Hampstead and Highgate, where I've lived all my adult life. I'm the only Jewish person standing in my constituency in Hampstead and Highgate, and I think the only one on this panel. But I've also been a big supporter of the Jewish community. I go to Eilith Synagogue, and I've been on the leadership team there. And I also support many Jewish charities, including I'm on the board of Jewish Women's Aid, a trustee there. And when I wanted to stand for national politics, I've got a business background as well, rather than a career politician. I wanted to obviously look at the policies that I thought were right, and I was really impressed with Reform UK, but I also wanted to look at the party's views on Jewish policies. And when I looked at Reform UK, I was really impressed versus the other parties. Like you, I think anti-Semitism is really bad in the UK. And I think one of the reasons is the two-tier police system that has been operating both in London under Labour and Conservatives nationally, which is basically giving leniency to some communities and not to others. So, you know, Jewish people just for wearing kippah are moved on. And I think it's really important that the police is run fairly and inclusively and fair for all. So I think that's a big issue. But I also felt that Reform UK did stand up the most at the beginning after October the 7th. You know, we really called out about the hostages when a lot of the other parties stopped talking about that and sort of moved to quicker solutions, talking about Hamas as terrorists and really actively supporting the Jewish community. And I thought that was really important and encouraging. But I also thought that Reform UK had a number of other policies across the board, which were really relevant to the needs and values of Jewish people. And I just wanted to pick three particular ones out. And I also wanted to say that it's really important that all of the commitments we've made in terms of spending have been fully costed out. And we're the only party to actually advocate getting the national debt down, so saving more than we spend. And as a businesswoman and CEO, I think it's really important to make the books balance in the economy, both nationally and locally. And the other parties, from what I see from the manifestos, are advocating going further into debt, which I think is really dangerous with the national debt. Just the repayments are completely unserviceable, especially with the interest rates going up to the level they are. So what we're looking at, and the first one is cutting taxes to make work pay. And I think this appeals to a whole community, whether you're just starting out and we're talking about tax at the lower end, not so much at the higher end, but not having income tax up to 20,000. So at the moment it's 12,500. We've had a terrible cost of living crisis. You know, students are coming out of university. By the time they've paid the inflationary rents or housing, they can't get on the housing ladder. They have no money left at the end of the month. Is rewarding them for working, putting more money in their pocket, and that will kickstart the economy and help everyone. But we've also looked at business taxes because we want to encourage people to start businesses, to be in business, and we're introducing some tax cuts for business, and also inheritance tax that I know is an issue. We've already paid tax on that money, so we're going to raise inheritance tax from 350,000 threshold to 2 million, which is pretty much 95%. of the population as, again, a fairer tax. But as I say, all funded from savings we found, a lot of it on government waste, but where we can save it. And then safer streets is another really key one. And I've touched on crime earlier, but I think it's really important to have more police on the street as a deterrent. Most crimes, whether it's to the Jewish community or more generally, are not prosecuted because the police haven't got more money, but there's not that toughness on crime that shows that we're serious about this. And there's no repercussions, especially I felt for the Jewish community. So it's important that we all feel safer on the streets, and we have the investment in that. And the third one is zero NHS waiting lists, which we've again got really good policies to get more junior doctors and nurses and staff into the NHS, reward them. So as I say, the income tax threshold will put more money in their pocket, but also nurses in particular to pay off their student loans. We're not going to have any interest on student loans. I think that's criminal at 6% compound. It's really difficult to even pay back the interest now, but that will encourage people, nurses and doctors, to stay in the NHS. And then also at the other end, to incentivise consultants who are currently leaving in their 50s and 60s, because it's more tax efficient to retire than to stay in business. We'll reverse that and encourage and incentivise them to stay in the business. And then we were touched on VAT in schools. We wouldn't have that, but we also think we should incentivise people to go private, whether that's in schools or in healthcare. If we're taking the pressure off the state schools and the NHS, that's really positive and puts more money for the people that can't afford it to have smaller class sizes and less waiting lists and no waiting lists. So I really genuinely believe that we're the only party to take bold action on our economic prosperity, our public services and our community. And I think if you want reform, you really have to vote reform. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Nicola Payne for the Green Party. Nicola.
Good evening, everyone. So my name is Nicola Payne and I'm the Green Party candidate for Birmingham Edgbaston. I am really delighted to be here this evening, and just like everybody else, I'd like to thank the National Jewish Assembly for giving me this platform to highlight how the Green Party will work in support of Jewish communities. Now, a little bit of information about myself first. I come from a teaching background, so I currently work as a teacher in a state school just north of Edgbaston, and my involvement in the Green Party actually was largely motivated by my students. So every single day as I stand in the classroom, educating them, getting them excited about their future, I have to stop and pause sometimes and think, what is that future going to look like? And this is not just due to climate change, but also to the increasingly unstable international political environment and the increasingly unstable socio-political environment within the UK. You know, there's a lot more social division that's going on, and that's particularly difficult for me to see as I work in a multicultural school. Now, the Green Party, I believe, is an essential voice in Parliament that will ensure that the government is held to account on the decisions that it makes, and I think that it will treat those issues I've just mentioned with the urgency that they require. Now, with regards to the constituency of Edgbaston that I'm standing for, it has had a really rich presence of Jewish communities dating back a few centuries, but recent decades have seen a decrease in the Jewish population in Edgbaston, but Birmingham more widely, with a lot of Jewish people moving to Israel, Manchester and London. Now, given the fact that the Jewish population in the constituency that I'm standing has decreased over a few decades, and given that anti-Semitism has risen, we are very conscious of the fact that the Jewish communities who do live here need to see that the political leaders are respecting their religious ways of life and protecting them, particularly right now. Edgbaston is home to Birmingham's largest synagogue, Birmingham Central Synagogue, and it also accommodates the University of Birmingham, which I'm aware, and the Green Party is aware, has seen a pro-ceasefire encampment of late. And disgracefully, in tandem with that, it has seen a rise of anti-Semitic incidents, not just by the protesters, but also by students within the university more widely. Now, The Green Party believes that a call for ceasefire in Gaza is not inherently anti-Semitic, but we do fully appreciate the fact that when these calls for a ceasefire are made in the midst of rising anti-Semitism, and they are made in a place of education, such as the University of Birmingham, where every single student deserves to feel safe and deserves to feel free to just go there and be educated, then we understand that in this context, calls for a ceasefire kind of inevitably feel anti-Semitically motivated. And it is disgraceful to say, but some of them have been. So where this has happened, we condemn it wholeheartedly. And we would strongly urge that any future protests or encampments were to happen, that those leaders of those protests and encampments were to liaise with the Jewish communities within the university to ensure that they felt peaceful. With all of that in mind, I want to make crystal clear this evening that when the Green Party calls for an immediate and bilateral ceasefire, those calls are motivated solely by a fundamental respect for human rights and a desire for peace for both Israeli citizens and Palestinian citizens. We live by the belief, at the Green Party that human rights are for everybody, or they are for nobody. So human rights are why we continue to be absolutely horrified by Hamas's barbaric atrocities on the 7th of October. Human rights are why we call for the immediate and safe return of all hostages, and why we feel deeply upset for the families who are still waiting for people to come home, and for Jewish communities across the world who feel that this issue has not received sufficient attention, and that this issue has often been clouded by the ongoing situation in Gaza. And human rights are why we call for equal rights for Israelis and Palestinians. I'm also conscious of time, so I'm going to leave it there, but I really look forward to answering everybody's questions and exploring further how we can work for the Jewish communities in the UK and beyond.
Nicola, thank you very much. Christian Wakeford for the Labour Party.
Thank you, Gary, and it's great to be back speaking to the National Jewish Assembly for this being my second online visit. For those that don't know me, I'm Christian Wakeford. Up until Parliament was dissolved, I was the Member of Parliament for Bury South, and obviously campaigning hard to be again. Bury South is arguably one of the largest Jewish communities outside of London, and with the boundary changes could well be in the top 3, if not the top of that chart, with the addition of Broughton Park communities to the constituency. I want to speak a bit about the work that I have done for the community to show the type of people who are now within the Labour Party. So for those who don't know, I was originally elected as a Conservative MP and now a Labour candidate, having crossed the floor on the 22nd of January, the 19th of January, 2022. My first chat with Keir Starmer was that week, where for an hour and a half conversation, which is something that a lot of Labour MPs haven't even had over 5 years, the majority of that was about the Labour Party changing and tackling anti-Semitism. Since then, I personally have spoken in conferences with the European Jewish Association in Babin Yar, Theresienstadt, Auschwitz. I've been to AIPAC with Labour Friends of Israel, where I'm a vice chair for the group, because I think it's serious that if we're talking about anti-Semitism, we are not only talking about anti-Semitism in the oldest hatred of its form, but in the more contemporary element of anti-Zionism. I myself have been victim of anti-Semitic abuse, despite clearly not being Jewish. My name would probably give that away to most people, but I have had protests outside my office and lots of the abuse that you would probably see either on the streets matching with these protests, but also online. Recently, I was in AIPAC in Washington just a couple of months ago, speaking to Democrat congressmen about the issues faced over in the States. And there was a very concerning stat that came out, which was per capita for the Jewish population, Britain has become the most anti-Semitic country in the world. And that was something that struck a particular chord with me, because we see it on the streets, we see it online, we see it on our university campuses, we see it in our schools, yet it's still ongoing. And this hatred doesn't start here, it starts in Iran, where they are feeding and funding a lot of these terror groups, whether it's Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, which are, dare I say, engendering the approach that we've seen in these protests. How many times have we seen that the Houthis have been supported? How many times have we seen Hamas being praised and the Hezbollah flags being flown on the streets? We've got to a state where enough is enough. We do need to tackle this seriously, and I think Keir Starmer, as a serious man wanting to bring integrity and seriousness back to politicians, we have to start doing that now. Keir just today on LBC was talking about a two-state solution, and I think most people would agree we want a two-state solution. However, I think we are further away from it than we have ever been before. There is arguably a lack of trust, and rightfully so, on both sides, but that will have to start with civil society and governments on both sides being prepared to sit around the table. And at the moment, I'm not happy with Fatah being around there, considering they are 19 years into a 4-year term. But in order to acknowledge a two-state solution, you need to acknowledge that Israel is safe and secure. And at the moment, it is not. So until Israel is safe, a two-state solution and process cannot even be started. So I think when we speak of these protests calling for unilateral recognition of Palestine, that is not where the Labour Party is anymore. The Labour Party has fundamentally changed. We've seen it with our candidate selection process. We have been sending numerous candidates to Israel, both before the pogrom of the 7th of October and afterwards. I myself was there on a solidarity mission back in January with Louise Elman, Margaret Hodge and Ruth Smeeve. They themselves are either still standing or back in the Labour Party, along with Luciana Berger, shows that actually there is a strong sense that actually this is a much more welcoming party than you would have said so nearly 5 years ago under Jeremy Corbyn. So what we do need to be doing is sending a very strong message right now to university vice-chancellors that the anti-Semitism we're seeing in your campus can't be tolerated. Freedom of speech is one thing, but freedom of speech comes with consequences, and those consequences need to be adhered to. But if there's one message that I would give, very conscious that I'm approaching the end of 5 minutes, is that this fundamentally is a changed Labour Party. And if you didn't need any more proof, the proof is that I am here speaking as a Labour candidate to you. We have seen Dan Poulter, Mark Logan, we have seen donors, we have seen businessmen across the country coming across the Labour from the Conservatives. That would not have happened in the former Labour Party. There is a lot more still to do, but it is fundamentally different from where it was 5 years ago. And from that point, we'll move hopefully forward to taking questions and being grilled by everyone in the audience.
Thank you very much indeed, Christian. Before I throw it over to questions, I'm just going to make 2 or 3 very brief announcements. Firstly, those of you who are not already members of the NJA, please join. It's at www.nja.org.uk. It's £10 a year if you give us a direct debit. Secondly, I just wanted to put a date in your diary. That's Tuesday, the 16th of July, 4 weeks from today. I think it's going to be the first time ever that the BBC are actually addressing a Jewish group as an assembly. We have Richard Burgess, who is the BBC's Director of News Content, and he'll be addressing us. We've already got quite a lot of people registered to attend, so please do come. That'll be a very, very special evening. Thirdly, I also wanted to remind you that in September, the beginning of September, September the 8th, we have our next solidarity mission to Israel, which will give you the opportunity to visit people who've been badly affected, which is, of course, most people, by the events of 7th of October, the opportunity to meet an Israeli cabinet minister, and also we'll have media personalities with us. So please do consider coming to that event on the week beginning the 8th of September. So without further ado, I'm going to move over to questions. Barry Epstein, you're first. Barry. Please come off mute. Barry, you're still on mute. Can you? Is there a problem there? All right, you're off mute now. Barry.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Gary. Golda Meir, God rest her soul, said that a strong Israel would create a strong diaspora. When will people realize that the rollout of history has created in various forms anti-Semitism going back longer than 2 millennia? And that if anybody wishes to attack the Jews, in the words of Winston Churchill, they will surely, surely, surely lose. And he was one of the Christian Zionists of the last Liberal government of 1916 to 22. Can the panel address the urgent question of leaving Jews alone?
Interesting. Thank you, Barry. Christian, you go first.
I think the concept of leaving Jews alone is open to a broad interpretation. I would like to see obviously a lot more interfaith work. I think at the moment that can't take place. There's so much anger in particular communities, but I don't want to see Jews left alone. I don't want to see isolation. I want to see the extending and integration of those communities, and rightfully so, which is why over the last 5 years, I've made it my part to learn as much about the community as I can do. But I'm proud to represent this community. I've been speaking about the benefits of our community organizations, of Jewish festivals, of charities, of schools throughout that time. So I think leaving alone, no, but I think what we should be doing is making sure there is safety, there is no hatred on these marches, there is no anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism literally thrust in the faces of our Jewish communities on a weekly basis, in terms of the protests, but more importantly, on a daily basis in some of our education institutions. That's why I was proud to lead from the front for the marches against anti-Semitism, both in London and in Manchester, and will continue to be a strong advocate against those things. But I think in Manchester we do things differently, and we are much stronger together than we are apart. So I would try to preach that we should try to come together, whilst also making sure that the Jewish community, not just in Israel, but the diaspora, is safe, strong and thriving.
Thank you, Christian. Nicola.
Hello, thank you for that question. I think I don't know the context of that quote, but the words on their own, a strong Israel would create a strong diaspora, I think I completely agree with. We do need to we want every country to be strong. We also want every country to be democratic. We want every country to be part of a global community. Touching on what you said, Christian, about education, obviously my background is teaching. I could not agree more. Anti-Semitism has risen in schools. That has created a lot of isolation for Jewish students and Jewish communities. And I think that it is something that needs to be tackled throughout every single school from the government top down. Because in situations like this, I know myself that when teachers see an instance of racism or sexism or homophobia, they often don't receive sufficient training on how to deal with that. And that can lead to inaction. So I think from the government top down, we need clear training on how to ensure that Jewish students are growing up in an education system that never, ever leaves them alone.
Thank you. Catherine.
Thank you, and thank you, Barry, for your comments. I absolutely agree. We need a strong Israel. We need strong support for Jewish people, so there isn't anti-Semitism. But a number of the others have talked about, everyone being equal, but we are not equal at the moment because of this two-tier police system, and that's the crux of the issue. And you need strong police and strong leadership of that police from the politicians to ensure that we are protected and looked after and given the support we need.
Thank you. Ritendra. Sorry.
Right. Yes,
Oh, yeah.
thank you for your Mr. Epstein. Thank you very much for your question. I think personally, I think it would be unfortunate for us, for a nation, for a community, if we did leave Jews alone. Just as long as there's been anti-Semitism, Jewish people have played a fundamental role in Europe and beyond for many thousands of years, and it would be a shame if anybody left Jews alone. We need, as a liberal, I believe in communities, and I believe that communities matter. Communities are where families grow up together, where they work together, and they feel safe together. It is our politicians that I would suggest have chipped away at community cohesion. The Reform candidate mentions and blames the police, and it's unfortunate that the police are being blamed. It's not the police's fault. They have been cut. Their numbers have been cut. Their training has been cut. Their knowledge, their experience, knowledge that has been built in over time has been reduced. It is a skeleton force. The numbers are much lower than they ought to be, and we all know why. The issue is really to making sure that the police are funded correctly, and the funding will improve training that they receive. And it's not, I mean, telling you as somebody who has grown up in this country, who's born and brought up in this country, I understand full well what racism looks like and what it feels like. And it's no good at all blaming the police, dealing with the shortages that they have been given. But we need to make sure that the police are being trained properly, and that they understand how the law works and what they need to be doing to ensure that we all communities feel safe, so that Jews and anybody else of our one community all work together and all can live together with respect.
Thank you very much, Ritendra. Before I come to Amit, can I just say to people, some people are writing questions in the chat, please raise your virtual hands. I'm giving first priority to those who raise their virtual hands. Okay, Amit.
Thank you, Barry, for that question. I think the rise of anti-Semitism in our society is completely unacceptable. The fact that in this day and age, in the 21st century, anti-Semitism, the fact that it not only exists, but it's at a record high, is very, very sad, and more needs to be done to tackle it. I do believe that we have a proud record of taking steps to address it. Our country was the first to adopt the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism in 2016, which Lord Eric Pickles, played an instrumental role in drafting. Michael Gove played a key role in helping to provide regular grants to the CST, which I think provides a fantastic level of support to the Jewish community. And I'm proud that the government has year on year increased funding, especially over the last year, since October the 7th, to 54 million. They're doing a great job, but I also feel sad that the CST needs to do the job that it does in this day and age. When it comes, a few candidates have mentioned education, and I do agree that education is also key in not only educating people about anti-Semitism, but helping people to identify the forms of anti-Semitism. And I'm proud that the Prime Minister has supported the National Holocaust Memorial and the Learning Centre in Parliament in Victoria Tower Gardens, which will play a key role in educating people. What worries me most is the changing nature of anti-Semitism in our society. You know, the forms that it takes on social media, you know, the way that it, you know, different levels and the ways that we have to identify it. The media, the bias that we've seen on the media as well, even in recent stories, you know, since October the 7th, and when hostages are released, the narrative that the media take, I think that it's a very, very fine line, you know, the way that the news and the story is portrayed. And what's worrying more, we see it now, you know, day in, day out, is it's from educated people. And that's what's even more concerning, especially at universities, from professionals. And we really need to root out this cause. And I think, you know, Conservative Party has played a key role in identifying and doing everything it can to root out. But there is, I acknowledge that there is still much, much more to be done. And just on the final point of whether Jews should be left alone, as I said, I live in Hendon, where we have one of the most diverse constituencies in the country, where Jews, Hindus, Muslims, we literally live side by side. Diversity thrives here, and I want to make sure that, you know, we don't want to promote segregation, but continue to ensure that these various communities live side by side, and that we're underpinned by shared common values, which is British values, which is a shared love for this country. And, you know, that's what we want to promote here in the UK.
Thank you very much, Amit. Next question, Carl Cohen. Please come off mute, Carl.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, Carl. Good evening, Carl.
Good to see the whole audience, and it's good to hear from the candidates. I'm a great admirer of one of the great Englishmen, Sir Christopher Wren. He is buried in the crypt in St. Paul's, and on his crypt in Latin it says, "If you want to see my work, look around." I address this to the politicians appealing for our votes. If you want you and your parties to see what happened to our beloved country, look around. The Jews do not feel safe at all. They feel forsaken. It's not a personal opinion. It is a fact. If the police force does not want to protect us, because they can do it very easily, they do not need numbers. They need the will to do it. We are totally abandoned. No other country allows hateful demonstration explosions of anti-Jewish hate every week, non-end. The French have banned it, Germany have banned it. We don't want to do it. The situation is so serious that I appeal to you. How can you keep a straight face, you, the candidates, assuring us that all is fine, when the chief of the police force in London explained to us the meaning of jihad, when police officers have taken down the pictures of the hostages? I don't think it's that simple. I fear for the future of British community. The BBC, by the way, is one of the main promoters of anti-Semitism worldwide. It's not my view. Colonel Richard Kemp said it, and many other people. We are in a dire situation. All the soothing and assuring platitudes and telling us a two-state solution, when there are already 22 failed Islamic state, Arab states, 56 Islamic states, so they need another one. And also to preach to the Jewish nation, to the Jewish army, the most moral army in the world. I served in it. To preach to them morality is just not only chutzpah, it's very offensive. I would like to hear what
Thank you.
your
Thank
guest
you, Carl.
to say.
Nicola, would you like to go first?
Hi, Carl. Thank you for your question. I think the thing that really stood out to me there was you said that the police had taken down pictures of hostages. I was not aware of that, and that is absolutely disgusting. And that just adds further and further to the national distrust in policing, which is at an all-time high. And I think there are the solution comes in two forms. Firstly, you do need more funding in the police. There's no two ways about it. You need more funding in public services. Even the police officers with the very best intentions will not be able to do a good job when they are working overtime, when they're completely overstretched. However, with that said, there are police officers with bad intentions. That is also a fact, and there's also no two ways about that. So what the Green Party are calling for is for every single police officer to go through regular practice for fitness and assessments, and that is in relation to multiculturalism, diversity, so ensuring that every single police officer, whatever community they are from individually, they are still able to communicate and interact respectfully with people of other communities as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Catherine.
Hi, and thanks for your excellent point, Carl. I was nodding a lot through that because, first of all, Reform UK are the only party that are advocating stopping hate marches. Like some other people in the chat have said, that they don't even know what they're marching about, and it is frequent and threatening to Jewish people. And to pick up an earlier point, I wasn't saying that I was blaming the police. That there certainly isn't enough police, and we need extra funding. But what's interesting a bit about this is the police are actually scared to prosecute Muslims, particularly because they've been threatened. And this is why I was talking about the two-state. And we just need really strong police, strong leadership to ensure that toxicity is removed from the police. And yes, that is education, but also firm leadership. And as I think Katie made a point in the chat, this needs decisive tackling. It's not a gradual change. We need to be really firm, and we definitely support that, to support the Jewish people.
Thank you. Ritendra.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Curran. Thank you very much for your questions there. I'm going to disagree with you on the issue about policing, that yes, it is a numbers issue. The situation that you're describing, I suggest to everybody listening, has been created by the Conservative Party. And what I mean by that is that there have been cuts not just to schooling and education, but also to civic society, to our NHS and our police force, those who are here to keep us safe. The experience that I was talking about, mentioning before, that has now gone, that learned experience that has been cut. The numbers of the police have been cut, their training budgets have been cut, and it's as though they're having to reinvent the wheel. The wheel was already there, but the Conservative Party have punched out the spokes of that wheel. And it is unfortunate that we are having to deal with the issues and talk about the same sorts of things over and over again, decade after decade after decade. I remember very clearly as a young child watching riots happening in the streets and the police being blamed. Frankly, they weren't too sure what they were supposed to be doing. It is not the issue. It's, I mean, the level of policing at the moment is inadequate because as I understand it, and the conversations that I have had with police commissioners and constables on the pavement here in Harrow East, is that it's not so much that they're feeling scared, but the issue is really one of their abilities to carry on through and keep people safe. And what I mean is that those facilities that the police require just aren't available to them. And it is, frankly, and it has been, the Conservative government that has been cutting them to the bone. The bit that I will agree with you, Mr. Cohen, is that all is not fine. And I understand the concerns around marching and the excessive marches of it. But as a Liberal, I will say that everybody here has a right to protest, and it's irrelevant what they're protesting about. but that protest has to be in respect and with respect to our communities and our young families. We were talking about, yes, so I mentioned it. I think the previous person was talking about strong leadership. Strong leadership will come through the high standards in the police that the police themselves want to live and want to breathe and want to work in. And that strong leadership has to come from proper funding. That strong leadership that we insist upon will only come if they are being correctly, if the correct numbers are being put into place. And the reason is because that strategy isn't taking care of what I would describe as the police. I'm struggling to describe it here. The bad apples aren't just one or two in the police force, that there are a number, and you don't have to be black, white, or Jewish to know that there are bad apples. Recently in London, not recently at all, sorry, but not that far back again, we had the Sarah Everard situation, the incident where a young lady was raped and murdered by a police officer. And this is what I mean. The police service has been cut to its bone, where we are getting the wrong sorts of people coming into the service for the wrong reasons, and they are just not being caught in the safety net that we, the citizens of this country, would like our police forces to maintain a certain level of professionalism, a high level of professionalism. And there's only that one point that I've made, and I'll keep repeating it again, there's only one reason why we've ended up in this situation where all is not fine, and it's the Liberal Democrats. I would suggest to everybody here, that has the plan in place to make sure, and that strategic awareness of what the police force requires to ensure that we have strong leadership and to ensure that we have professional policemen that are delivering the service that we need to see.
Thanks very much for tender. Amit.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your question, Carl. You said that we're acting like all is fine, and I can assure you that I'm certainly not acting like all is fine. I want to start by just actually picking up on the comments made by the Lib Dem candidate. What's happened from the marches and since October the 7th has nothing to do with police cuts, and that just shows how off the mark they are in terms of understanding the fundamental reasons, of the rise of anti-Semitism, the poison that people are portraying, the media and everything else. It's got nothing to do with police cuts, but actually what is happening on our street, what people are saying, and what we need to do to call that out. The greatest thing about this country is having the right to vote and having freedom of speech. And of course, I know everyone here will want to protect that. But what's happening now is that our freedom of speech is being abused. Racist behavior on our streets is completely unacceptable. The chants from the river to the sea, that is anti-Semitism. When I get called a coconut, when the Prime Minister gets called a coconut, that is not okay. And I will do everything I can to make sure that is called out. What I don't agree, and again, a failure of our media and the biased media, which everyone here knows, is that arrests are being made. I'm a sitting magistrate, and I know this for a fact, that arrests are being made. It's just, I wish the media would publicize this more. What, again, I think is very worrying, and I see this day to day, is when these criminals act like the victim. And I think that, again, is my first point of, educated people on these marches, and they are acting like the victims. And I think that is very, very worrying. The final point, Carl, you said, what are we all doing about this, and as candidates, and to bring it back that we have a general election coming. I am proud to be part of a party that I believe has done everything possible to stand up for the Jewish community, to stand up for Israel. because it's the right thing to do in this case. And I know the Prime Minister has always stood firm and continues to stay firm. He was the first Prime Minister ever to send military support to Israel to help defend herself. And I hope that that will continue. I want to bring back and help maybe address the elephant in the room, that I think for the Jewish community here in Britain, the Labour Party will be an absolute disaster for the Jewish community. And I know, speaking to so many residents, especially here in London, so many people are worried about the Labour Party. Look, I agree the Labour Party has come a long way since 2019, and I give credit to the party. But unfortunately, anti-Semitism still bubbles very closely to the surface. And Christian, who's on the line today, I think he spoke very well. But unfortunately for me and so many residents here are very worried about the party behind him and the stance they take in supporting the Jewish community and supporting Israel as well. And, you know, whether it's to do with the ceasefire that members of the Labour Party continue to protest on. And, you know, everyone here wants peace, but in the midst of a war, when we have, you know, we can't have a ceasefire with terrorists. We can't even think about a ceasefire when we have hostages still in captive. It's the BDS bill. It's the protest that we see. The mayor of London here in London is in charge of the protest, and he has not in charge of the Met Police, and he has not taken a strong enough staff. So I know when everyone's talking about the police here in London, it's the mayor of London that has the ultimate responsibility. And even recognizing Palestine, I think, as I've said before, this is the wrong time to do that in the midst of a war to potentially reward terrorism. So this is everything that the Labour Party are standing for. I am worried. So many other people in the Jewish community are worried. So I want to bring that back to the table of actually, you know, when it comes to the candidates, when it comes to parties, the Conservative Party will always be the party that will always stand up for the Jewish community and for Israel.
Thank you, Amit. Christian.
Thanks, Gary. There's quite a few points from the question and from some of the responses. First of all, I'll agree with Carl. You know, things aren't rosy. This is not a picture of what a sound, safe state should look like. And when we speak to people on the doorstep, in calls, in emails, this is probably the least safe the Jewish community has felt for a long time. And I myself have felt it when I've been in London just after returning from Solidarity Mission in January, with a picture with me and President Herzog going viral, being seen nearly 3 million times. I didn't feel safe. Having to cross the Palestine protest to head to Washington, I didn't feel safe. When you compare and contrast that to the vigils, to the marches against anti-Semitism, the crowds speaking up for Israel, there is a vast difference. I'll disagree with Catherine slightly. I don't think it's a fear of charges. I think it's a fear of arrest. And part of that is the numbers. We've seen in Manchester cases where people have been arrested, they've been put in a van, and then the van itself has been mobbed to the point for the police's own safety. They have had to release individuals, which is clearly not a position we want any of our police officers to be in. But there's also a point of education around our police officers. When I've seen images and videos of people chanting Kaiba Kaiba Ya Yahud on the streets, I know what that means. I'm not necessarily sure the police do. So I think there's a huge element of education in order to highlight, recognize, and understand some of this hatred, this anti-Semitism, and the blatant racism. I would increase it to be recognized and tackled on our streets. I'll disagree with a lot of what Amit said. I think when you were talking about recognizing Palestine, I think the Labour Party policy, as has just been seen in the manifesto last week, replicates what David Cameron said just a couple of months ago. The last time I checked, I think David Cameron is a Conservative Foreign Secretary. So I think it's taking some chutzpah to go that far. But I think when you start looking at the elements, you know, BDS bill, we wanted to help the government improve it to the point of actually going even further tackling Iran and the IRGC, tackling Russia, with everything they're doing in Ukraine, where my family is from. So in terms of opposing the bill, it was opposed because it was a bad bill. The Labour Party itself has fundamentally said that we are and will forever be against BDS. I have said it numerous times. I've said it in the chamber numerous times. And I think the anti-Semitism that we see on the street, you know, has been able to foster and fester because of the atmosphere we've created. The Freedom of Speech Higher Education Bill was meant to tackle Holocaust denial in our universities. If anything, it's given it a platform and made it much more difficult to remove. So I think in terms of saying that the Jewish community won't be safe under a Labour Party, it's not safe under the Conservatives at the moment. So I think what we really need, we do need increased numbers of policing, which has been committed to in our manifesto. We do need to tackle these issues much more seriously. And that's why Keir himself has said he wants to introduce a minister for faith communities. He wants to engage with all faiths in delivering his key 5 missions for government moving forward. But ultimately, it's what we can do to actually make sure these communities, and I'm not just talking about the Jewish community here, but actually have a meaningful platform to be fully entrenched in local authorities. And that's what's being talked about. So yes, there's a huge issue about safety and policing. It's not been addressed properly now. I've been calling for it in the chamber with the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, the Foreign Secretary for months following the October 7th pogrom. The truth is, it's not been resolved. So the only way to even think about tackling this now is change.
Okay, what I'm going to do now to speed things up, because we've only got just over about half an hour left, is to ask 3 people to ask their questions, and then I'm going to go to the panel. So the 3 people, Jonathan Isaacs, followed by Amira Halperin, followed by Irene Lancaster. Jonathan.
Thank you, Gary. Great. Why have none of you mentioned the major election issue of immigration, both illegal and legal, and its ginormous numbers? And in the case of the Jewish community, I'm particularly concerned about the immigration of Islamists and incipient Islamists. And what are your parties going to do about it, please?
Thank you, Jonathan. Amira, please come off mute. Amira.
Thank you. Is it okay? Can you hear me, Gary?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, just for transparency, I would like to say that my question is relating, I'm going to ask you a question relating to the current situation, but just for transparency, I would like to say that I'm not asking just as a British citizen and a person that reads the news, but rather as a person that is working for the last 20 years with the Palestinian community here in the UK and on research of radicalization. So I have also information from inside. So I'm not going to be maybe satisfied with the shallow answer to my question, which is, how are you going, especially I heard Amit talking about the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and how he addresses the problem of radicalization. So my question is, first of all of you are talking about big problems, big issues of anti-Semitism, hostages, problems in Israel. I have a simple question to ask you. We live here in this country. I came here, I immigrated from Israel. I came here to work. I worked at the university. And since October 7th, the situation was at the university that there were students and members of staff who are members of terrorist organizations. And I can't work here anymore because the management didn't allow me to talk because they said that Israeli scholars need to be excluded from campus because we are to be blamed in genocide. How can you address, especially I'm asking Amija because you talked about the fact that you understand and you're very sympathetic to our situation. So my question is really, with being more realistic. How are you going as you're the conservative, you're in power. How are you going not only to make me safe after I've been threatened by a student who is a member of a terrorist organization? Not only that, but how can you also help to mitigate the problem of radicalization on campuses? We didn't come here to work as professors in order to integrate politics in our curriculum. This shouldn't be the case. And it shouldn't be the case that leaflets would be distributed at the university saying to exclude us because of our ethnic background. How are you going to help us continue working and providing our families here?
Thank you, Amira. Thank you. I think your question is very clear. Irene Lancaster, your question, please.
Thank you. First of all, I don't know Amira. Amira, I'm not Israeli, and I can assure you that when I worked at Manchester University, it was exactly the same, and they didn't even know I was Jewish half the time, and it was the same sort of thing. So I really sympathise. I support Carl. I was very impressed with all the people from London or out of London and Birmingham, but I'm actually now within Chris Wakeford's, if you like, constituency, if he gets back in. And I'm just terribly worried about Rochdale, the north of England, Lancashire, where he used to, I think, be a councillor. I'm very worried about Angela Rayner. I've taught in Ashton-under-Lyne Christian. I'm very worried that women are being excluded. And I would like to ask people, as Christian did bring up the question of the LBC interview today with, I think it was today with Keir Starmer, which I heard, in which he did refused when asked to say whether Israel was committing genocide against the Palestinians. So I'm very sorry, Christian, and all the others, they can't be left off the hook. Because when I recently visited Israel, where my family lives, I was asked what's wrong with David Cameron, because he and his sidekick, as they put it in very good Hebrew, in the House of Commons, are not defending the Jewish people. So I'm not trying to make party political point. I have voted Labour till now for Graham Stringer, who I thought was a marvellous MP. We're now moving to Bury South. That's our third move from our area of Thornton Park. But I would like to ask about this Labour not talking about Israel not being a genocidal state, not caring about what the Jewish community thinks because he thinks he's got us in the bag, and also the Tory party being very arrogant. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Catherine, would you like to go first this time?
Yes, thank you. So some excellent points there. So I'll just go through each one. So Jonathan, on immigration, I think you probably all know our view, Reform UK view on illegal and illegal immigrations. It has been high numbers, and the point I made at the front in my intro, that I think it's important that if you do have smart immigration, that there is integration. That we don't have immigrants that come in and don't want to be proud of our country and be part of it. So I think all parties are saying we need to reduce immigration and recognising it. So we're not the only ones, but we've got good policies to be tough on that, so that we can have enough amenities both for the people here and people coming in, not being irresponsible on those numbers. And then moving on to Amira with the staff. I agree, and I think this is happening across the board, and I found this at work, that we are being labelled as creating genocide rather than us being the victims, if you like. And I think I get few solutions on that. I mean, obviously that is definitely coming from our leadership at Reform UK, and that education, and saying that is absolutely not the case. And I don't think that's being talked about enough from the main parties. So supporting that, but I think that will really help deliver it. And then Irene, you're absolutely right. I agreed with Amit about what he was saying about Labour, and I do really worry about some of their anti-Semitic sort of team in the background. But I don't think Tory have done that either. And I think it's really important to support and educate and have that strong leadership to stop the anti-Semitism.
Thank you. Ritendra.
Yes, hello. Thank you. I'm back again. So thank you very much for everyone for your questions. Mr. Isaacs, I'll start with immigration. But before I do, I'm going to give you a quick warning that there is a theme going on here in my answer and in my answers to come, I'm sure. Frankly, this is a problem. Just as the police numbers have been cut to the bone and are spread very thin, a problem that has been created by the Conservative Party. The immigration situation is a problem that has been imposed upon us. It's been imposed upon us by the Conservative Party. All that needs to happen is that Home Office needs to be run properly. The staff to process the immigrants that are coming in. It used to be, but the Conservative government have been reducing taxes for their friends. There are no friends, I would suggest, to the Jewish community. Look around us, as a phrase was once put to me. The Home Office needs to be properly funded. It needs to have proper staff in there that can process the people that should be claiming asylum and remove those that shouldn't be. That system is not in place, and it's much easier for the Conservative Party to blame it on the immigrant as though they created the situation and not the Tories themselves. There was a point, I think, where are we with Mrs. or the Professor, I think, Amira Halperin. The work with helping people work together. Frankly, I think what my experience really has been is with the CST and how they have been working in the school, in the education environment. The anti-Semitism that we're seeing again is an issue that has been imposed upon us by the Conservative Party. As a former teacher, as a former assistant head teacher, I have seen how social media is being used to cyberbully children, but bullying each other. Young children, primary school children, are being taught by their older brothers and sisters how easy it is to inflict pain and to cause hurt, sometimes anonymously. And that sense and that feeling has been riding through the education system. Unfortunately, it hasn't been tackled properly. Again, that's because we need proper trained staff. We need people who understand the effects of the issues that children are facing today, which is extraordinary, the issues that they're facing today, particularly after the COVID pandemic. There's been a massive gap in staff's ability to help children who have been scarred to get through their own education. And the Conservative Party is not here to help us. Frankly, we would want to. I'll quickly talk about policies before I come to Mrs. Lancaster.
Just another a minute or two, and then we'll need to move on because we're running out of time.
Right. Well, with regards to Mrs. Lancaster's point before talking about my policies here, it is again. It's about how do we educate our young children and through the systems when it comes to secondary education and understanding what is correct behaviour, what is polite behaviour, and what is just downright wrong behaviour.
Okay, thank you. Amit.
Thank you, Gary. I'll take the first question about immigration. Look, someone knows I'm the son of immigrants. My family came here from East Africa as refugees when they were given just 90 days to leave the country with nothing. I think this is the greatest country in the world. And one of the best things about this country is that we will always help those in need. And we have a proud record that we take in the highest number of refugees, asylum seekers from countries where people are facing persecution, and whether that's from Syria, whether that's from Afghanistan, or even Ukraine. There are emergency flights, there are emergency visa programs, and those in need are always helped. What unfortunately many have seen is unfortunately the rise in illegal immigration, hence the Rwanda bill and efforts to stop the boats, because that is a direct attack on people who want to come to this country legally, and it also prevents people who would be in need of coming here further. And it's very, very upsetting that people abuse the generosity of this country. And also immigrants, asylum seekers who come to this country, Ugandan Asians, or from this morning I was with a community group from Hong Kong who also sought refuge in this country recently, a few years ago. And it's about having those shared values, which I keep talking about, that people who come to this country, who are reciprocating by being part of this country and contributing to it in the best possible way. Going to Dr. Amira's question, I'm very, very sorry to hear what you have experienced, and I admit it's not good enough, and more needs to be done. I do know that the Prime Minister has met with the chancellors, the vice chancellors of all the major universities, and he's worked with the Jewish Students' Union as well to call out and to give them more powers to recognize extremism, to identify extremism, and to call it out. But as you said, more needs to be done on a practical level, in the classroom, what is being taught, by the lockers outside as well, the messages that are being shared. It's at that grassroots level where more needs to be done to call out. When it comes to genocide, I firmly believe it's completely wrong to claim that Israel is committing genocide. And the International Court of Justice has not found that Israel is committing genocide. And I think, this is a completely, this genocide remarks are completely wrong. And I think it's very, very upsetting. I get, called, and I'm sure many others here as well, oh, you're supporting genocide. That I'm a father of 2 young children as well. And I think it's deeply hurtful. And I think it's very, very upsetting. And it just shows in this debate, in this this geopolitical conflict that we're living through at the moment, just how far off we are, and just how much more needs to be done to educate, promote education, just to actually, for people to understand what exactly genocide is, and for people to know what is happening, and to call out Hamas for housing hostages or using their own Palestinian people as human shields.
Thank you, Amit. Christian.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. I'll try and get through all those quite quickly, but I'll start by just saying that the comments by Rosalia in the chat are absolutely abhorrent. I think they're wrong, and you should just be ashamed of what you've written in the chat box. In regards to the questions, Jonathan, immigration, both legal and legal. We've got a broken system. We absolutely do. The obvious question is, who broke it? I think in terms of the concern you've got, there's obviously a huge backlog in the tens of thousands of cases that are still being dealt with. The government policy at the moment is barely to touch any of them. If you've come in the country since one of their immigration bills has come through in the last 9 months, you're not being dealt with, you're not being going through any sort of system. And in fact, the government have lost 8,000 asylum seekers. So I think it's a very damning indictment as to where we are. The obvious solution is we need to start dealing with that backlog straight away, but actually doing as much as we can to try to smash the gangs in terms of creating a serious solution to this, not just a gimmick for Rwanda, which most people think for £500 million is barely going to do anything. So I think serious politics is needed for what is a serious issue dealing with all of our international partners. Amira, obviously awful what you've had to go through. Obviously prescribed groups need to be enforced in their entirety. If it's a terrorist organization, but there's no part of being a member of it anywhere in this country. And if you do have any details, I would very much like to know, because this does need to go higher up and being dealt with by government and law enforcement. It's actually absolutely wrong. But like Dean said in the chat as well, all this comes down to education, education, education. The long-term solution has to be teaching people that this is wrong. But ultimately, if you're being taught tolerance and integration in school, but going home to hatred, then that's still going to perpetuate. But from my own experience dealing with the David Miller case in Bristol with the JSOC there, my concern moving forward is that anti-Zionism is potentially a protected characteristic now on the back of that employment tribunal. So I think we really need to take stock, not just as a Jewish community, but wider society, as to what Pandora's box is being opened in this case. Because working with Lord Mann and the APPG against anti-Semitism, at one point we had more Premier League football clubs signed up to the IRA definition of anti-Semitism than we had universities, and I fear we're going backwards. In regards to your question, Irene, genocide, obviously in regards to what Keir was saying, genocide is obviously a very legal definition. I'm going to be quite open. I don't think genocide has taken place. The only genocide that I have seen was October 7th itself. The only genocide I have seen is what happened to the Uyghur. The only genocide that I have seen is what Russia has perpetuated in Ukraine. As far as I'm concerned, Israel has a right to defend itself and is continuing to do so. So I think the ICJ, like Amit said, hasn't found genocide. It's pushed forward a case which I think was ridiculous to be looked into in the first place. I think we need to make sure that we say so from the highest levels, and that we continue to do so. But in short, genocide, no.
Thank you. Nicola.
Hello, I'll answer those questions in reverse order. So starting off with you, Irene. The Green Party believes in upholding a rules-based international order. And so when it comes to the International Court of Justice's judgment so far, we do obviously support we obviously support the ICJ, so the legal process. But obviously Israel also has a right to defend itself through that legal process as well. And Mira, with regards to your question, there is nothing I hate more than cancel culture. And I'm so sorry that that has happened to you. Obviously, I don't know the exact context, I don't know the specifics, but for you to not be welcome at your place of work is, first of all, awful, but second of all, does not sound legal to me at all. And I think that all it does is shut down debate and create fear in a place of education, which should be obviously a place of people being able to explore their beliefs. And then, Jonathan, in relation to your question regarding illegal immigration and legal immigration. So the Green Party believes in, firstly, ending the hostile environment towards immigrants. And I'm sure that we would all agree with that, because anybody who comes here deserves to feel completely welcome here, and they deserve not to live in fear. And I would hold that for somebody who's come here legally or illegally, because at the end of the day, they're human. And the significant majority of people who come here illegally are doing it because they are running from something that they fear. They're running from persecution, they're running from sure death. And I think that when we label people as illegal immigrants, if that's all we use to talk about them, we're not really seeing them as human. We're not acknowledging their fear. Of course, the immigration system needs to be manageable because we have limited space, we have limited public services, especially under the past 14 years of Conservative cuts to those services. But I think when we talk about it, we have to acknowledge the fundamental humanity at the root of the issue. The Green Party is calling for safe routes to be established. It's calling for immigrants who are here going through the asylum process, for them to be permitted to work and contribute to society. So many people who come here, they are stuck here for months, even years, without being able to contribute to the country that they've come to live in, because their asylum process is in a backlog. And again, it comes to funding. It has to be properly funded, and we have to be willing to pay the taxes that require that. And the Green Party is right now the only party that has the courage to say we will tax the super billionaires because they gain so much from society that they should be giving back. And again, a topic that has come up a lot tonight, Christian, to steal your Labour slogan, education, 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 take it from the teacher in the room. Education will not work if it is not properly funded. I'm currently leading a department that is full of trainee teachers because no school can keep teachers. I have departments within my school that are understaffed and they're having to cover lessons every week. So how can we possibly think that we're going to be able to educate our children against anti-Semitism, against homophobia, against sexism, if the teachers in front of them are first-year teachers who are just grasping the subject? They can't even think about anything to do with social issues. So we have to return to a situation where education is properly funded. That is the root of all of this. And that is the end of my questions. So I'm very aware that we're short on time.
Thank you. Do you have time? Do the speakers all have time for just 2 more quick questions? The last round of questions. You're nodding your heads. Good. So Leonid Yanovich, followed by Benjamin Tamba. Leonid, please turn your sound on and you're there, and your camera if possible. Hi, Leonid.
Yes.
Your question.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. 3 very, very quick questions.
They need to be quick.
Is ethnic cleansing going on in Gaza? That's number 1. Second, if there is a ceasefire tomorrow and Israeli forces are pulled out of Gaza, who's going to be in charge the day after? Not what you think should be, but in reality, who will be in charge? And the third question is 2 pro-Palestine marches and the display of Palestinian flags have anything to do with a huge wave of anti-Semitism?
Thank you, Leonid. Benjamin, please, very quickly, your question.
Good evening, everybody. My question is, Palestinians have always turned down the idea of having a state. Arafat started in years. They made billions from it. Hamas, Mahmoud Abbas, they've all made billions from this illusionary idea that the Western nation has created political careers out of, about 2-state solution. Does any of you politicians really believe in that idea? And if you do, describe it to us. Describe what it looks like to us. Because it has accumulated to October 7th, which is very horrible. If you really believe in it, if it's not just a political career term, and if you really believe that Palestinians are actually looking for a state, or you politicians are always actually looking for a state that will bring peace to the state of Israel, describe it to us.
Thank you. Ella Bennett just put up her hand at the last moment. Ella, quickly, your question.
Hi. My question to the parties is regarding diversity, equity and inclusion, where that was once a way of ensuring that minorities were included in the workspace and in politics and policy making, that sort of thing. I know that the culture wars kind of put an end to DEI, but what I wanted to know was, is there going to be any recognition from any of these parties post-election, let's say whoever gets voted in, is there going to be any recognition of the Jewish community as a minority group that should be part of the diversity, equity and inclusion mandates going forward? Will the mandates be brought back?
Okay, well, each of the guests, you've got 1 minute or so to answer those questions. Ritendra, you go first.
Thank you very much. So let's have a look. So the first question, as I understand it, was is ethnic cleansing happening currently? That's difficult to say for me personally. That's difficult for me to say from looking at things from this side of from where I sit. But what I can tell you is that there is that at the end of the day here, that from yesterday, there needs to have been a bilateral ceasefire, and I don't mean a pause. And what I mean is that there needs to be a safe transfer of hostage, and that has to happen under a ceasefire from both sides. And after that ceasefire, There shouldn't be any more continuation. And what I would like to see in the room, or rather to help answer your second part of your question there, who I wouldn't want to see in the room, because they don't earn their right to be in the room, is the current Israeli Prime Minister or anybody from Hamas. They have proven themselves to be unhelpful. They've proven themselves that they do not have an answer. We need to have a different set of people in that room to make sure that this sort of thing doesn't happen again and again. And I say this because in history, we've seen this again and again and again. I mean, this is a fork in the road for us, a extraordinary, special fork in the road. And I know that we've said this before. We said it before in 1948. We said it again let me have a look at my notes, in 1967. We said it again in 1973, in 1991, in 1995. And we're saying it again from October the 7th of 2023. Enough is enough. These people are not helping and they do not have the answers. That's what I will say, what would need to be happening in the room. And flags, in the manner that they're being used in the marches, it all depends on the manner, frankly. I mentioned the theme, that there have been cuts to the system, and it's the Conservative Party that has created the environment that we're currently having to struggle within by cutting the number of polices. And then to be told by a career politician that that's off the mark is hilarious. I'm an employer. I employ a number of people in our business. I employ Jewish people. And I will tell you now, you don't need me to tell you that business, that international business, our high streets that are being decimated by the Conservative Party, they want to invest in their businesses. They want to invest in their communities. And they will do that if they know that there is a workforce that is healthy and that is educated. Without those two things in place, the other parties talking about growth will not happen. The savings in the system will. And Benjamin's question rather, two-state solution, is it viable? Well, yes, I think it should be. The Palestinians themselves, just as an Israeli would do, they have a right to live in peace. They have a right to live in a free and independent Palestine, just as much as anybody else has a right to live in a free and independent country of their own. How that is achieved has to be a Palestinian question for them to answer. We can only insist that it has to happen, and how that and the way that will have to be will be through our influence as a European bloc. But and the last question. Sorry, I
75 years of money, billions
Sorry,
of money, political
please, Benjamin, stop.
What is the loop?
No, please, we've got to finish. Carry on, Ritenja.
Sorry, I didn't get the last bit of the last question from Ms. Bennett, I believe.
She was talking about DEI. Yeah.
Which party is going to recognise the Jewish community as a minority ethnic group that deserves the protection of the Equality Act and the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion mandates that were cancelled by the Conservatives through their culture wars?
Right. That's a brilliant question. It's a fair question, I think. I can't give you the answer for it right now because I don't know what our policies are, but I think it's a fair point to make, and I don't see why I wouldn't want to champion that as a legal definition.
Okay, thank you. Amit, you go next.
Thank you. I'll be very short in my responses to there's some major questions there, but all I want to say is when it comes to a ceasefire, when it comes to recognizing Palestine, everything here just boils down to the fact of the release of the hostages. That is the fundamental point here. It's only after the hostages are released that we can I think we can talk about anything else. And finally, on the final question about the minority groups. You know, we will continue to work in conjunction with organizations such as the Board of Deputies, Jewish Leadership Council, and NJA as well, about what the community would like to be done and how we can work with the community to achieve what they would like.
Thank you, Amit. Christian.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. Leonid, ethnic cleansing going on? No. Day one after pulling out, I have a real concern because obviously the government in Gaza is Hamas. There can be no future with a Hamas government. So I think we all need to think of what day one after the IDF pullout really looks like, because at the moment, I don't think there is any plan. And I think we need to start thinking of that very quickly. Do protests and Palestinian flags have anything to do with the rise in anti-Semitism? The waving of a Palestinian flag in of itself is not anti-Semitic. The way we have seen it used is. I think when we've seen convoys driving down from Bradford to Finchley and Golders Green during the month of hate a couple of years ago, that was anti-Semitic. When we've seen Palestinian flags waved outside of communal buildings, whether it's schools, kosher bakeries, etc., that is anti-Semitic. So I think, yes, it has a lot to do with arrays. The question about a two-state solution, I think it's the ideal where most people would like to be. Yasser Arafat himself had the chance with the Camp David protocols and then decided to pull out. But if there is, we need to think of what borders are being recognised, what government is being recognised, how it's going to be funded. There are so many issues with just recognising it on day one. So it can't happen. It needs to be part of a process and these conversations. But right now is not the time to do that, and that is very much the Labour Party policy at the moment. Ella, your question of the recognition of the Jewish community, I think, like you said, there's been a lot of concern over the last few years about culture wars. So I think there's a general reluctance across the entire political divide of looking at the Equality Act. I myself would like to look at it from a few different angles, but I think to be fair to Amit, I would agree with what he said of engaging with all communal bodies, whether that is the JLC, the JRC, the Board of Deputies, the NGA, whichever groups want to be involved in that conversation. Because during 5 years of representing the community, that question hasn't come up. So I'm more than happy to have those conversations, but at the moment it's not a concern that's been raised. But just to agree, the one point that's been coming up in the chat again, Rosalia, your anti-Zionism is astounding in this forum. To say that Israel wants to withhold textbooks, etc., from Palestine. It's for Palestinian textbooks funded by UNRWA, funded by the UK taxpayer, that perpetuates hate, preach jihad, and supports martyrs. We cannot do that. We should not fund that, and it's wrong.
Thank you. Nicola.
Hello, I'll go through these questions really quickly because I know we're tight for time. Leonid, with regards to your question regarding ethnic cleanser in Gaza, I think that is a question for the courts. In terms of ceasefire, who would be in charge? Obviously, Hamas is in charge. There is no denying that. I think that following the ceasefire, it's the job of the international community, particularly the UN, to work towards a durable political solution which ensures stability. With regards to waving Palestinian flags, I agree with Christian here. I don't believe that waving a Palestinian flag is inherently anti-Semitic. But obviously, it depends on the context. As I referred to earlier in my statement about the University of Birmingham and the encampment, there have been instances within that encampment of anti-Semitism. So the two can get mixed. Benjamin, with regards to what the state of Palestine would look like and within a two-state solution, the Green Party believes firmly in self-determination. And so again, I think that's a question for the Palestinians. And then Ella, with regards to your question on diversity, equality and inclusion, the Green Party are the biggest cheerleaders of diversity, equality and inclusion. We think it's essential for a functioning and harmonious society. With regards to the specific groups that would be included, I don't know off the top of my head who is listed in the manifesto, but I don't see why the Jewish community would not be included in that.
Thank you, Nicola. And the last contribution goes to Catherine.
Amazing, thank you. So again, very quickly, so Leonid, I was very interested in your first comment on ethnic cleansing in Gaza and that being called out. I really worry about these real sort of hate words like ethnic cleansing. It's very much like genocide, and it's used against Jewish people in the same way that it's been perpetuated for us. So, you know, and we also talked about the Palestinian flag. I was in West Hampstead when the cavalcade of Palestinian demonstrators were coming to London for the first march. And alongside the Palestinian flag, they had Palestinian lives matter, like Jewish lives didn't matter. I mean, all lives matter. I think that's important to say, and had the river to the sea. So it's coupled with those things that to then level it at the Jewish people. I think, again, like a lot of speakers and in the chat have said, it is about education and showing how this isn't genocide by the Jewish people. You know, there's been numerous things like aid that the Jewish people have got into Gaza, but it has been stopped by Hamas. So again, the education that people think that, you know, Jewish people aren't just defending themselves, it really needs to get out so that we can support that. And we, as a party, are saying that. And what was the other thing? And just finish off on Ella's point, you know, absolutely from UK support the Jewish community. We're very supportive of NJ and all of the Jewish community. So yes, it is important that they're recognised.
Thank you very much, everyone. It just remains for me just for a few moments to propose a vote of thanks to our excellent panel of speakers this evening. You know, it is a real tribute to our democracy that the five of you are firstly prepared to put your names forward for what is really can sometimes be a rather thankless task. I personally was a parliamentary candidate on a couple of occasions some 30 years ago. And I have to say that the efforts that you're doubtless putting in terms of going out canvassing every night and everything else you're doing are absolutely tremendous. Thank you so much for giving your time to the National Jewish Assembly. I do hope that we all stay in touch, because one of the things that the NGA wants to do going forward is to have good communications with all of the major political parties, and you can be sure that you will be hearing from us going forward. So once again, a huge thank you for giving up your time. You've all been excellent. I've really enjoyed the evening. I get the impression that loads of others have also really enjoyed the evening. Everyone's enjoyed the evening. There was one problem in the chat I noticed, but that apart, everything's been fantastic. So well done, thank you, and have a good rest of the evening. Good night.
Thank you.